Metal Gear Solid 5 is Metal Gear to me. This was my first game in the series, and even 10 years later after playing through MGS 1, 2, and 4 once each, and MGS 3 like 10 times, 5 still feels like the idealized form of tactical stealth action gameplay. The gameplay loop has been totally rebuilt from the ground up to give the player more choice in their tactics than MGS has ever had, and probably will ever have. To facilitate classic high-risk infiltration, the worlds of northern Kabul and the Anglo-Zaire border region are divided into a series of open-air Groznygrads, with the player in charge of reconnaissance, infiltration, and exfiltration, with 1,000 micro-choices occurring every minute when you're in a mission. Should I keep my distance or close the gap? Should I shoot out the bulb lighting up the shortest route, or will it alert the guard nearby? I could dispose of this guard instantly with a headshot, but my aim hasn't been great this mission. It might be safer to approach and grapple before he can notice me. But there's another guard watching his back. I have to deal with him first. Every second of the Phantom Pain is exponentially more complex than the last because of the stacking conditionals of your playstyle, along with the slow methodology of dismantling bases. Some choices are better than others on their face, but what is and isn't a bad decision is contingent on the goals you've set for yourself. Sure, entering a combat phase might generally be bad. It's usually caused by a mistake on the player's part, and you lose a few points, but now all the enemies are coming to you, and you don't have to hold back anymore. There's a massive variety of lethal weapons, none of which you will use, because the best guns in the game are the ones you walk into the first mission with. A silenced assault rifle and tranq pistol. With few exceptions, you could walk into any mission in the game with these two guns and a few bricks of C4 and complete them with little more difficulty than you would have faced while fully kitted out. Not to say the boys in R&D are worthless. There's a treasure trove of useful tools and support weapons, but they're all situational at best. The most powerful tools restrict your rank or don't work on other players' FOBs, and every item you take with you into the field detracts from other bases' bottom dollar. I just found it simpler to stick with the basics until I knew I needed heavy firepower. Until I was so flush with GMP that it didn't matter how much shit I took into the field. I actually really wanted to invest more time in managing Mother Base this playthrough, but I never felt like I was able to engage much with my boys. You decide on R&D projects and you deploy squads to raiding quests, and that's it. I couldn't develop attachment to my soldiers because the systems are so impersonal. If I want to get close to a Diamond Dog, my only choice is to deploy to a Mother Base and smack around the chumps patrolling the platforms. There are a couple points in the story where the writers use your soldiers to evoke pathos, and the atmosphere of those story moments does most of the heavy lifting, but the earnestness with which my violent and aggressive sons thank me for slapping their shit off does a lot of work in making those moments effective, even if I feel like they shouldn't work. Of course, barely evoking pathos is still a major story highlight, compared to the rest which evokes no pathos and gets no bitches. There are interesting threads here and there, like the wake of destruction following Big Boss and Snake Eater, the lies we tell ourselves to facilitate our own toxic behaviors, or where an individual's identity begins and ends as a piece of a greater whole. To what extent do our own personalities define us in environments where that personality is taken from us? While the story does indeed present complex topics like these to the player, the writers ignore all of them in favor of a slightly deeper exploration of language as culture, which in itself is pretty interesting, but doesn't link as neatly into the story as presented compared to other MGS games. Now, I already have a good idea of this game's development history. I know that it's literally unfinished, and that, in fact, being unfinished is its only major thematic through line. The media is about itself as the first idea of the thinking stoner. I know this from experience, but frankly too much about MGS5 feels off to the extent that I can only assume it's intentional.
The game itself is the Phantom Pain.
The change in game feel is the most obvious example. Triggers aim and fire, D-pad for items, a body slam instead of a roll, even a fucking sprint? None of it feels bad. In fact, it's a great way of streamlining MGS's notoriously unintuitive combat system for a wider audience without sacrificing player ability, but it's your first, well, 30th major clue that some shit is going on here. Ocelot is not himself in this game, and the popular theory is that he's just not fucking with you here, like he is in every other game. In MGS5, Ocelot is not only on Big Boss's side, he stays loyal to Big Boss even after his double death in the MSX games. I know the real reason though. He finally decided to get medicated by Diamond Dog RX. But he never needed a change. Big Boss left him just the way he was. 10 years his junior. After the incident in Zanzibar Land, Ocelot must have been devastated because he's back off the pills by the time we see him in MGS1. Huey is the only character whose delusions are directly dispelled in front of the player, which was necessary for guys like me who have a soft spot. A weakness for men who whine. Huey's kind of the key here. On an initial playthrough you might go, oh, this guy's fucked in the head, but on subsequent playthroughs you go, oh, everybody on Mother Base is fucked in the head. Both Ocelot and Venom are brainwashed into believing Venom is someone else. Miller's completely paranoid about Major Zero being out to get Diamond Dogs even though Zero has barely been a person in a decade. Venom specifically has actual brain damage and sees shit that isn't there, and this is the only Snake who doesn't bother asking a bunch of inane questions. The 1984 motif hints towards the doublethink, but the first thing I think of when I think of 1984 is the authoritarianism. After you beat the game, Mother Base will be decorated with Big Boss's watching you posters, but I never felt like I was the iron fist of authority in either the narrative or the gameplay. Besides the kidnapping, I guess. You're only about as fascist as the average military force, which, in fairness, is pretty fascist. Along with a surface-level Moby Dick and Lord of the Flies shit, it feels like someone, maybe an anonymous contributor to the writing staff, wants desperately for you to know that he reads at a 9th grade level minimum. Little happens narratively in The Phantom Pain, at least on screen. There's like maybe 30 minutes of cutscenes in this 90-hour game, the far cry from previous MGS games that were 40% cutscenes by volume. Things kind of just happen unless you're listening to cassette tapes religiously, but I managed to progress the story faster than I can listen to tapes, and progress isn't saved when you die. They're a great system for replacing codec calls, which have always been a staple of Metal Gear, but frankly they could have stood to have some more comic relief. The story-important calls and tapes have always been entertaining in their own way, but my favorites are the goofier optional ones. Letting the characters goof off sometimes allows for a deeper understanding of personality. The only joke tapes in The Phantom Pain are the hamburgers of Kazuhira Miller, which are all fantastic and big reasons why I like Code Talker and Miller so much. On the other end of personality is Quiet, who is designed to be a sexy piece of meat who can't speak for herself. This is a pretty big spoiler, but Quiet is the only woman in the story, and she's allowed to speak exactly twice. Once during the prologue, and once during her last mission where she decides to kill herself to save Big Boss. On the way there, Quiet tries to kill you, you kidnap her, she shoves her ass in your face, and by that point I guess she and Venom had fallen in love. What a dog shit romance, man. The entire time, Venom acts just as detached from her as he does from the rest of the plot, unless you're unlucky enough to get one of two scenes where they either dance or shower together. How did this dipshit get so much worse at writing women? The crush Ocelot has on Big Boss at MGS3 is sincerely a better romance plot than Quiet and Venom. And I'm accounting for my own bias here. Look at him. I'm gonna say a slur. Meryl was a bit of an archetype in MGS1, but by the standards of action games in 1998, she could have been on a stage. I thought Olga and Fortune were a little better. Fortune doesn't get to do much, and Olga suffers from the weird direction the story takes, but overall still solid characters with a lot going on. Emma only exists to make Otacon sad. Eva isn't much more than a Black Widow with exposed cleavage, but the boss is one of the best written characters in video games. Seeing the level of nuance in women drop off a cliff after one of the writers left the series is a nice reminder that games are usually made by more than one person. There are actually good reasons for Venom having no personality, but his detached behavior is infectious, and he makes it kinda difficult to get invested in the plot. He doesn't respond when spoken to, and when Skullface pulls out his 10-minute long monologue, Venom looks like he's not paying attention. This is appropriate because I wasn't paying attention either, and Venom is literally me. As in, Venom is the player's stand-in, and he's explicitly not John Metal Gear. The biggest tell is when you shoot an animal and he doesn't immediately devour it. Venom is some guy, thrust into the shoes of the most important boy in the whole world, and while he rises up to the challenge of infiltration, he's desperate for guidance as soon as Miller returns to Mother Base. He has little agency beyond gameplay decisions. He's essentially a stooge just getting bossed around by the real power players of the war economy. He's middle management in every sense of the word. This is a major disappointment when the protagonist is historically the strongest aspect of MGS's narrative. Venom has no real motivation, no real goal, and no real backstory, all in service of a dumbass player empowerment narrative that intentionally falls flat if you've paid any attention to any MGS game. Legends are not a good consolation prize for a life devoid of choice. Venom is kind of a net negative on everyone in the game except for Big Boss himself, who uses Venom as a pawn to build up Diamond Dogs while Big Boss develops Outer Heaven. Everyone can immediately tell that this isn't the same Snake, but most will lie to themselves out of convenience. Nobody is really happy with Venom Snake as a concept, but Major Zero seems to believe he's necessary as a distraction to protect Big Boss from Cypher or whatever. As a new player to MGS, I thought I wasn't really following the plot because I was missing context. I just felt lost. As a fan of Metal Gear Solid, I didn't bother trying to follow the plot. I was happier being lost. The Phantom Pain wants to be about Big Boss's fall from grace as a hero to soldiers, but there are two problems. One, the protagonist whose descent into darkness we see isn't the Big Boss anybody actually cares about, and two, Venom doesn't actually do anything that bad. There's one clip where they try to trick you into thinking Venom shot a bunch of kids, but actually he alerted the entire base to his position and blew all their eardrums out to reveal a pile of blood diamonds under the poop bucket. Then he saved the kids and teach them skills they can use to crawl out of a soldier's life. Cool! Your only ally who actually uses your child for war gets ousted from Mother Base almost immediately after you learn about it. Maybe there would have been more evil decisions to be made in a finished game, but I do know that what's available is not narratively satisfying. I would have loved to see the dumb omnivore from Snake Eater turn into a horrible monster, and he is pretty shitty, but he only really allows something terrible to happen, and then keeps it a secret from one of his husband, and then takes advantage of the confusion to play his own Metal Gear Solid game where he does the exact same stuff as the player in a different part of the world. And Miller is incensed by this because he and Snake discovered gay sex together while Greek wrestling. I really don't know how to sum up my thoughts on this game. It is at times the best and worst Metal Gear. The narrative fails to pay off any of its own plot beats or follow up on threads from previous games in ways that actually develop them, and it peters out completely with Skullface's dumbass monologue that not even the protagonist pretends to care about. On the other hand, the player is set loose in two different, exceptionally designed open worlds full of guard posts that support each other and dynamically react to the player's choices on both a second-to-second personal basis and a grander hour-to-hour basis. The mix of preparation and improvisation each mission requires leads to non-stop excitement and nearly endless gameplay in a much realer sense than other open-world forever games. If you have an interest in trying Metal Gear, play all of them in order so you can feel the true phantom pain of an unfinished story and underwritten characters. If you don't have an interest in Metal Gear, just play this one and save yourself the heartache. What's up with the music, man? No hip-hop, no R&B, and where the fuck is Oingo Boingo?